There are a lot of rackets in Mario Tennis Fever, 30 of them to be exact, and people usually want to know what the best one is to, give them the upper hand. Well, guess what? In this video, I'm going to be going over what I think to be the best racket in Mario Tennis Fevers, along with the worst ones. Before we go any further though, I just want to mention that I played quite a good amount of online, and I am a top 100 player in this game, believe it or not. So you can trust that my takes on this tier list have at least some credibility to it. I'll be uploading some videos later on how I exactly managed to achieve top 100 status, and just, maybe you guys can learn something from it, maybe you'll be entertained, we'll see in the future, be on the lookout for that. Anyways, starting off with F tier, we have the Personal Racket and the Charge and Chuck Racket. For the Personal Racket, I'm pretty sure you already know why it's F tier, there's just simply no gimmick to it, and this is the crazy part that I actually can't believe. I actually think the Charge and Chuck Racket is actually worse than the Personal Racket. Why I think so is because whenever you hit a fever shot, or more like just any shot to begin with, the ball is usually very fast and can sometimes just give you free points depending on the angle of it and how high and how low you hit the shot or whatever, right? But not with the Chuck Racket. No. If your fever shot touches the ground, it will turn into a football and will slow down immediately whenever it touches the ground, and it gives your opponent so much time to hit it back. The same applies to any regular ordinary shot with it as well. I think the Chuck Racket is the worst racket in the entire game. It is an actual handicap to use that thing. In C tier, we have the Typhoon, Tornado, Bullet Bill, Pokey, Ice, Inky, and Mud Rackets. The Typhoon and the Tornado Rackets are pretty much in the same boat, right? The wind it creates can screw over your opponents, but at the same time, it can also screw you over as well, because, say your opponent's hitting a shot and it just goes in the wind, it's gonna take a crazy turn, you're not gonna know where it goes. If I had to pick which is better, though, it's for sure gonna be the Tornado Racket, as it's hard to avoid, and it's quite distracting, whenever it's active and you hit the ball back to your opponent, and at the same time, it's also a buff racket, meaning, only you can use it and it can't be reflected back to you. Either way, they might not be the best rackets, but they're still pretty funny. The Bullet Bill Racket might work if your opponent has never seen it before, but, other than that, it's pretty bad and easy enough to react to hitting it back. Basically, it's just, you hit the ball with the Bullet Bill active, it turns into a Bullet Bill, it's really fast. That's pretty much it. The Pokey Racket is pretty interesting, honestly. The more you rally the fever shot back and forth, the bigger the Pokey stack's actually gonna get. It does max out at some point, though, but it does get bigger over time. That's not the only thing that gets bigger over time, When it lands, though, depending on how big it is, let's just say it's on your opponent's side, it can actually be kind of a nerf to even, see your opponent because of how tall it is. It's actually kind of harder to see them in the first place. But other than that, it's pretty easy to avoid hitting the Pokey, and the funny part of this racket actually happens whenever the Pokey falls apart and all of its, little bits are all over the court. Those are actually harder to avoid than the Pokey itself, as it creates pretty much a hot spot that you kind of want to hit to. Also, the little bits can sometimes cause some, pretty silly ball interactions, sometimes it just goes to the net, sometimes it'll go flying, just some random stuff could happen, and it's great. The Ice, Mud, and Ink Rackets are all pretty much the same, and they're all just kind of bad. I honestly would like to say they're probably the worst in this tier, actually. Some characters that float, like Rosalina, Boo, and Paratroopa, for example, they don't even get hit by the effect, when standing in it. They still lose HP, though, but they don't even get hit by the effect. Other than that, it's just really easy to play around, and it just doesn't create enough of a hazard, really. Moving on to B tier, we have the Thwomp, Banana, Question Block, Shadow, Spiny, Freezing Flame, and Volcano Rackets. Quite a lot. Starting off with the Thwomp, it's pretty easy for the most part to avoid, but sometimes even if you don't get squished and lose all of your HP, it has a little of a ripple effect where it can still cause you to trip if you're nearby it. Both of these effects happening, both the tripping and the squishing part, will usually lead to free points. However, right, that's just the obvious part of this racket, whenever the Thwomp falls. Whenever it's up in the air, some real funny stuff can actually happen. For example, just look at this. Whenever it's up in the air, some real funny stuff can actually happen. For example, just look at this. Whenever it's up in the air, some real funny stuff can actually happen. For example, just look at this. Whenever it's up in the air, some real funny stuff can actually happen. For example, just look at this. Whenever it's up in the air, some real funny stuff can actually happen. For example, just look at this. Whenever it's up in the air, some real funny stuff can actually happen. For example, just look at this. Whenever it's up in the air, some real funny stuff can actually happen. For example, just look at this. Whenever it's up in the air, some real funny stuff can actually happen. For example, just look at this. Whenever it's up in the air, some real funny stuff can actually happen. For example, just look at this. Whenever it's up in the air, some real funny stuff can actually happen. For example, just look at this. Whenever it's up in the air, some real funny stuff can actually happen. For example, just look at this. Whenever it's up in The banana racket is basically the pokey racket, but just a lot better as it pretty much just creates the hot spot for you to aim for. Keep in mind though, the fever shot of it is a curve shot, which is just worse than the straight, like, the straight flat shots like most of the other rackets have, so just keep that in mind. When you rally the fever shot back and forth, more and more bananas will end up falling from each hit, basically. So obviously it's a good thing to have on your opponent's side, but not on your side, but it's kind of, you can't really control that's the thing. When you end up touching one banana, you'll just kind of slide all over the place. You'll still have control of your character for the most part, but it's just a little bit more difficult. You'll end up losing HP as well, obviously. But if you're sliding and you touch another banana, that's whenever you trip and fall down, and that's probably like when you're going to either score a point or you're going to get a point scored on you. The question block racket is pretty much like the element of surprise, as you can get literally any racket in the entire game, and it's great to catch your opponent off guard. Some rackets are good, some are bad, but all in all, just pretty average. Could be pretty fun though if you don't really care what racket you're using though. The Shadow Racket is pretty cool as, like, it creates a clone of yourself to basically play a 2-on-1 match. Or if you're playing doubles, it's like a 3-on-2, but, I mean, you know what I mean. The benefit of this is you have a teammate, and that obviously, you know, makes it easier for you to return the balls back to your opponent's side. The drawback is it just doesn't last for that long, and later on in the video, you'll see a racket that just overpowers everything about this one for the most part, making it pretty pointless to pick in every way possible. The spiny racket, just like the pokey one, for example, ends up getting boosted with every single fever shot. They end up like rallying back and forth, where whenever it does land, more spinies will end up spawning from it. When they do spawn, they don't really cause like the most disruption in the world, like as a single unit. But like when there's a ton of them blocking your way, you're giving up on that point, or your opponent's not getting it. It's over. They also end up following you, so like they're kind of difficult to avoid. Like you will probably get hit at some point. The flaming freezing rackets they're just alright. Like they're pretty basic, but they have a purpose, and they give you a nice spot to aim for as well. Not much else really needs to be said with these rackets. Like, you know, touching the parts that came out of them, like either the fire or the ice, they just freeze you or set you on fire. There you go. If I had to pick which is better, though, I am 100% going the freeze one, as that little stun is often enough to make your opponent miss the ball, while the fire just kind of speeds them up for a little bit. And sometimes it can actually help, but I mean, like, why get something that can maybe help sometimes compared to something that, like, just guarantees you the point? Or more likely guarantees you it. I mean, me personally, I like ice element over fire, so, like, that's just me as well. I mean, you can have your personal preference, but I'd go ice every time, that's just me. In short, though, ice is better than fire in this game if you want to be all sweaty, try-hard, nerdy you like, or whatever. The volcano racket is pretty hard to play around, as it's pretty much just causing you or your opponent to always have to move around. And it is pretty easy to avoid the meteor eruptions, but, like, even if it does hit you, it's just fire, right? It's not the end of the world. A tier is what I would start to consider, like what's actually, quote-unquote, viable in this game. You can still play good with all the other rackets previously mentioned, but, like, now some of them are getting, like, really good. The A tier rackets consist of the Amp, Lightning, Ice Flower, Fire Flower, Mini Mushroom, Ghost, Firebar, Swerve, and Shove rackets. Starting things off, let's go talk about the Lightning and Firebar rackets, as they both have a pretty similar playstyle to each other, as like they create a hazard, and that's just set in place, and it gives you like a hot spot you want to hit towards. The differences are obviously like the element, and also the Firebar is always active, while the Lightning is not, like it'll sometimes come and go. With that said, you know, it's like, you would think the fire is better than the lightning because, like, you know, it's always there, but, like, no. Lightning too broken, right? You guys know Mario Kart. You guys know how good the lightning is there, the shock, right? Same thing here. And I gotta say, that's pretty cool. I'm quite a fan of lightning. That is probably my favorite element. Yeah, fun LB facts right there. Well, like, not including the light element, but you know what I mean. Again, fire just, like, you know, it's just not that good in this game. Like, yes, it's hard to control yourself when you're on fire, but you still can. The lightning and, like, that electricity stun lasts forever. There is nothing your opponent can do to return that ball if they get shocked whenever you hit the ball back to them. The same thing applies to you. You're not returning that ball if you're stunned. The Mini Mushroom Racket is extremely funny, and it's also pretty good at the same time. Like, I just love the Mini Mushroom item as a whole. Like, it's just so silly, it's just amazing. Obviously, if your opponent gets hit by it, you know, they're gonna be mini, right? They're gonna be much slower and weaker and have, like, way less of, like, a defensive reach. Oftentimes, this racket can actually give you, like, 1 to 3 free points just by one singular mini mushroom interaction. So it is quite good. The Swerve Racket is a pretty tricky one to rank, as it really all comes down to just, like, how good you are as the player, like, how good your positioning, and your gameplay as a whole, really. All of that's just gonna decide how effective it is. With it, though, like, it makes it so, like, you basically have the slice of boo at all times on your top spins, lobs, slices, and drop shots. One thing for certain, though, is never use this racket with a tricky character, or, honestly, anyone who already has a good curve shot to begin with, because you're not gonna really benefit much from it. It doesn't, like, the curve bonus or whatever, it doesn't stack. Like, there's just a set cap already. I mean, some of your other shots might curve more, though, but I don't know, that's just me. I wouldn't pair it with already, like, a curve shot character anyways. The only drawback to this racket is that, like, its initial fever shot, just like the banana one, is a curve shot, making it just a little bit worse than, like, the straight, like, flat one. The Ghost Racket is also, like, just like the Swerve one, as its effectiveness really all comes down to how well you as the player decide to play it. What it does is, you know, it makes you invisible, along with the ball being partially invisible as well. Obviously, this racket can catch your opponents extremely off guard, depending on how you play and, you know, like, how your shot selection and your positioning. Again, it comes down to how well you as a player decide to play this thing. I personally think this racket will work best with anyone who has, like, a powerful topspin, or, like, a really strong curve shot, as it just makes it so much more hard to react to. The Amp Racket is what I believe to be the biggest risk and the biggest reward racket in the entire game. When your effect is active, you spawn in amps every single time your racket touches the ball and you place one of them on the ground. When you place at least 2 on your opponent's side, the electricity flows between them, and you can have a maximum of 3 amps at a single side of the court. If your opponent ever has to run through an amp or electricity, I mean, guess what? They're not getting that point. End of story. Again, lightning, electric, too broken. The extremely dumb part of this racket is how long the amps actually stay put down, as, like, trust me, it is forever. If they're ever on your side, it's probably actually ideal to run into them on purpose whenever you have the time. So, like, you know, they'll disappear faster, as just running into the electricity current on its own is not actually going to do anything. However, this racket has one major issue, and that is whenever your amp effect is active, your opponent can also take advantage of it, making this racket extremely risky, very funny, and overall pretty luck-based, to be honest. It is such a fun racket, though. It really is. The Ice and Fire Flower, on the other hand, are just self-buff rackets, which means there is no possibility whatsoever for it to ever hurt you. When your buff is active, you know, you shoot some fire or ice balls at your opponent, either freezing or burning them, and I mean, you already know what happens next, right? They're either on fire or they're frozen. However, there is one more additional benefit that comes with this racket, and that is whenever you actually hit the ball back and you also fire all the fireballs or ice balls, it's really difficult to tell where the ball was in the first place. If I had to say which one is better, I mean, yeah, it's the Ice Flower. I don't know why I was trying to pretend like it wasn't gonna be. The Shovel Racket is also like a self-buff racket, and I feel it's usually overlooked, to be honest. When your buff is active, it gives you more power, and it pushes your opponent back with every single shot you hit at them. And this is a great racket for power characters and just anyone that does a lot of knockback with their topspins to begin with. The simple game plan with this racket is, like, whenever your opponent's far enough back, like, whenever you shove them far enough back, just, you know, hit them with a drop shot. There you go. There is one very big issue, though, with this racket, right? It is hard countered by the Chain Chomp, who takes 0 knockback. Ooh. However, Mr. Chain Chomp is actually not that good in the game anyway, so even with that little setback, you'll still be fine, to be honest. Moving on to A+ tier, we just have one singular racket, the Magic Wand. This racket has quite a few perks to it, making it just much better than the rest of A tier. For starters, though, whenever your Fever Shot touches the ground, Kamek's wand will be placed down wherever it is, and it's like a little turret. It shoots off magic effects pretty often. If your opponent ever gets hit by it, you know, they lose some HP, they get stunned for a bit, and their own racket turns into a frying pan, causing them to only hit back weak flat shots. Knowing this shot that your opponents can hit back is obviously a huge advantage, as like you can just play around that to begin with. If you ever get hit by the magic and you're thinking like, oh, it's fine, right? I'll just use my Fever Shot and override the effect. Nope. Sorry, Mr. Pan does not allow that. This racket all comes down to timing on whenever you activate your Fever Shot, as like one wrong misplay and you might lose the entire game because of it. Well, that is assuming you're playing a 1st to 7, which is basically ranked. There is one thing to note though, and that is if your opponent already activated like one of their buff rackets, like for example Invisibility, Amps, Fire, Ice, Shovel, whatever, you get the point, they still actually get to keep that buff even while using the pan. The only buff this racket 100% counters and stops altogether is the Golden Dash racket, which I'll be going over just a little bit later. Alright, here we go. We got S tier now, right? So, we got the Star Racket, Metal Racket, and the Golden Dash Racket. Keep in mind, S tier is the only tier I actually decide to order from what I think is the best to worst racket in it. The best being far left, and the worst being far right. All the other tiers I did not do this for. Starting off with our first 2 rackets, I'll just explain them both together as they're pretty much the same thing. The Star and Metal rackets are more self-buff rackets, and whenever you activate them, you're completely invincible, and you get a speed boost if you're using the Star racket, or you get a power boost if you're using the Metal one. These 2 rackets alone hard counter every single racket in the entire game, except for Swerve, Shove, and the Ghost one. I only ended up ranking the Metal Racket above the Star one because I just think power's better than speed, but that's my only reasoning to it. If you think speed's better than power, then go right ahead, both are great options still. Well, I mean, they're great options, assuming you don't know about the Golden Dash one. The Golden Dash Racket is both the best racket in the entire game and also the worst at the same time. It's the best because of just how good it is, but just like the Metal and Star ones as well, it's also the worst because of how lame it makes this game. With the Golden Dash active, you are for the most part immune to any Fever Shots hit at you. If your opponent ever tries to hit one, you just say, nope, sorry, and you just dash right over to wherever it's going to land, return it back, and you're probably getting a free point. When your buff is active, it basically makes it so you can return every single shot for the whole duration of the buff, assuming you're not, like, on the completely, like, opposite side of the court and, like, you're just saying hello to all the spectators. This racket is just so lame, along with, like, the previous 2 in S tier, that it just takes this very chaotic game and just makes it so defensive and boring. You can still play with hazard-based rackets against the ones in S tier. It is still possible to win, right? But, like, you're gonna have to put in, like, 110% effort and play very close to perfectly, while your opponent gets to just, you know, put in 60% effort, they're allowed tons of mistakes, and they can barely be paying attention, they'll probably win. The only drawback to the Golden Dash racket is that if your opponent is using the magic wand and your racket gets turned into a frying pan, you can no longer dash around. That is the only racket in the entire game the magic wand can kill its buff effect for. Even if you are playing magic wand though, it's a very good racket, right? But it's still extremely difficult to use and to play against the Golden Dash user. And not to even mention, but if you're playing Magic Wand and you run into a Metal or a Star player, congratulations! You got countered! You lose! It's still possible to win, obviously, but it's just going to be much more difficult. Any racket in the entire game has the possibility to be viable and to win, but it's just 3 are significantly easier to play and allow for much more errors to be made than a lot of the others. If it's not already clear, I am extremely against the S tier rackets in this game, as they're just so lame. But like, if you want the absolute highest chance of winning, then go right ahead, right? Just know, you're not my friend anymore. We are not friends. I really do hope they end up balancing those 3 rackets in S tier just a little bit better, and maybe just shorten the duration of them, or change something up with them altogether. A little idea I have is, you know, just make it so, like, all of the self-buff rackets in the entire game, they don't actually apply until the ball hits the ground, so, like, that way they can be reflected back as well, meaning if you use your Fever Shot and you're using Golden Dash and your opponent reflects it back to your side, they actually get the buff instead. This would make the game much more chaotic like it already is. Like, the game has the potential for it if you just, like, nerf big time those 3 S-tier rackets that just kind of change how the entire game's being played right now. But at the same time, though, that is just my opinion anyways. You might think you love those 3 rackets, and you know what? Good for you. I might not agree, but whatever. With all that said, though, there goes my Fever Racket tier list, and hopefully you learned something helpful in this video, and hopefully you don't become an S-tier racket user either. Thank you for watching.